Hey friends, I am Lindsay Stitches and I am a hand embroidery artist who makes embroidery pieces and embroidery kits inspired by places that I love and places that I want to visit from around Australia. I am guessing that you're watching this video today because you have come across my Perth blue boathouse embroidery and you're ready to start stitching it. So in this video, I am going to show you my entire process of stitching that embroidery to give you some ideas and tips on how to do it yourself. You don't necessarily have to do it exactly the same way that I'm going to do it. I will also show you some alternative techniques and different ways of doing things, and you can kind of do it however you want to do it and make your embroidery unique to you. So the first thing I'm going to show you is some of the basics of embroidery, like how to transfer your pattern onto your fabric, how to thread your needle, and how to fit your fabric into your embroidery hoop. If you don't need to watch that, you can skip straight forward to the stitching. And I think that is pretty much everything I have to say for now. So let's get into it. So the first step of the process is how to transfer your pattern onto your piece of fabric. You can pretty easily do this in a window, anywhere that you've got some light, but I have kind of this light box set up where I just have a few of my embroidery thread boxes. I have a piece of clear perspex and I have a torch that slides underneath so that I can see my pattern through my fabric there. Window will work just as well. So first, all I'm going to do, tape my pattern so it stays in place. That is how much you can see. Draw over that onto your fabric and you're good to go. We should now have our embroidery pattern drawn onto our fabric. It is okay if it's not perfectly drawn. It doesn't really matter that much. I usually kind of just use it as a guide, and then if I need to fix any lines that aren't quite straight, I kind of just try to fix those sorts of things with my stitches rather than make the drawing perfect. It is kind of tricky drawing on fabric, but yeah, the pen is heat erasable, so you'll be able to just use an iron, a hair straightener or a hair dryer, and that pen will disappear. To fit our fabric into our embroidery hoop, separate the two parts of our embroidery hoop. Keep the inner part on your surface, place the pattern on top. Again, this doesn't matter if it's not fitted in there perfectly. You can always add more lines if you need to. I've made a little bit of a mistake there. I sometimes do a thing where I fit the fabric to the hoop so I know where I need the design to be, and then I flip it over, draw the pattern on the inside there, and then take it out, flip the fabric over and put it back in there so you know that it's in the right spot. I've obviously done the wrong thing there, so I've ended up with only a tiny little bit of fabric up the top here and a lot at the bottom. It doesn't matter, I'll manage it, but maybe just test fit your fabric to your hoop before you draw your design on so that you know where it needs to be on the fabric. Anyway, put your outer part of the hoop over the fabric, and then we're just gonna pull at the edges of the fabric and also tighten the screw until it's all fitted in there nicely. You want it to be nice and taut, so I usually do it until it sounds like a drum when I tap on it with my finger. I've got it all in there. You kind of want the hoop to be sitting flush with itself, and that's looking pretty good. So the next thing that I'm going to show you is how to prepare your needle and thread ready for stitching. So I have my embroidery threads already wound onto bobbins. So I'm just going to take about an arm's length of thread. So I just extend my arm out like this until I get to here and snip it off. Your DMC embroidery thread is made up of 6 strands of thread that are all able to be separated. I'm probably just going to stitch the outline with 2 strands. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find 2 strands. That's 1, that's 2. And then you want to pull it really, really gently, because if you start pulling it like this, you'll get a big knot. So you don't want to do that. If you do get a big knot, you can sort of fix it by pulling the end and getting it back to a nice sort of state there. But what you want to do is just pull it really gently, put it down and pick it back up again where you've got a bit more control over it. But yeah, just keep pulling it really gently until it comes apart. And then I've got my embroidery needle. I just lick the end of my thread so that it's all together. I'm just going to push that through the eye of the needle. So I'm just going to pull it until it's about half the length of the rest of the thread. I'll just show you this from this angle because I feel like it'll be easiest to pretend like you're doing it yourself. I'm gonna hold the needle in my left hand. I've got the tail of the thread there. I'm going to hold the tail of the thread over the embroidery needle like this. So it's over the front of it. I'm still holding onto that needle there. And then what I'm gonna do is wind this part of the thread around the needle 3 or 4 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can see that you've got those little winds on the thread there. I'm gonna grab those with my fingers. So you've got them wrapped nice and tightly around the needle. Then I'm gonna grab the needle with my right hand and holding this knot here, or these winds of thread, I'm gonna pull it all the way through until I've got a knot there. Then I'm just gonna snip my thread. Now we have our embroidery pattern drawn onto our fabric. We've got our fabric fitted to our hoop and we've got our needle and thread ready to go. We are all ready to start stitching. So from here, I am going to backstitch all of the outlines. Apart from maybe a couple of them, I'm thinking maybe the window panes on the windows, I might not stitch those because I think I might fill in the color of the windows, like the glass color, and then stitch the window pane lines over the top of it so it looks like it's like in front of it. So I might leave the inside of the windows blank at the moment, but I'll see how I go. But basically, I'm just gonna stitch every single line. I'll quickly show you how to do backstitch. So yeah, let's get into it. To get started, we can start from pretty much anywhere, but I'm gonna start doing this line here and then I can kind of continue across on the square and then like do the roof. I try to keep as much continuation of a piece of thread as I can before I need to switch. So if we choose a starting point, let's say we're gonna start here, we'll call that point A. And then you wanna push your needle through from the back and pull it all the way through. If you grab this thread and go like this, you can kind of check how straight your line is, or you can adjust it if you need to. So I'm just gonna like follow this line. I'm gonna make my stitch about as long as like the weatherboard on the building. So if this is point A where we've brought the needle up from, then the point that we're going to take it down is point B. Needle there and then pulling it all the way through. So we've got point A where we first brought the needle up, and then we've got point B where we sent the needle back down, and then we're going to go down another stitch length and we'll call that point C. So point A, point B, point C, bring the needle up from the back and pull it all the way through. So this is where the name backstitch comes from. We're actually going to go back one step and put the needle back down through point B and pull it all the way through. So you've come up at point A, gone down at point B, come up at point C, gone back down at point B. And then we'll go another stitch length down and then back again into point C, and just continuing that process until you get to the bottom of the line. All right, my line is maybe a little bit crooked, but hey, I can kind of pull the fabric over and straighten it up a little bit like that. Yeah, it's pretty crooked, I think, but that's okay. So we have finished a line. This is what the back looks like. And then we can just start going along the line at the bottom. I kind of like to, where two lines kind of meet each other, I usually like to make the stitch say like that length, just because there is another line there and it means that I can use that hole as a guide for that stitch there. Then I'll make this stitch the length of that little block. Oh, and I've got a knot, so let's fix that. You can pretty easily deal with knots if you be nice and gentle and patient. So it looks like I can actually just stick my needle in there, and I might have made it worse. But if you pull it a certain way, you might actually be able to undo it. There we go. The main thing with embroidery really is to remember that it is slow and there's really no way of speeding it up. So I think you just have to kind of accept and embrace the fact that it's gonna take a long time and just enjoy the process rather than thinking about what the end result is gonna be. some pretty wonky lines happening, but guess what? I don't actually mind. Now I'm losing the tail of my thread here a little bit, so I'm just gonna pull that down a bit more. So there we go, that's where I'm at so far. And then I might even just do a little bit of a diagonal line to do this line of the boardwalk here. It actually ends like one sort of stitch length above the bottom of the building. So I'm just going to do that stitch to here and then down and then do that end of the boardwalk. Okay, so once you've done your last stitch and you either need to start with some new thread or move to a different spot, just flip your work over and send your needle underneath that last stitch that you did. And before you finish that loop there, just pop your needle through it and like that, and then do that a couple of times. And then you've got a couple of knots there, then just snip off the thread and you can start in your next spot. Okay, so I actually changed my mind about how many strands of thread that I was going to use on this. In the last clip, back stitched a little bit of the outline here with 2 strands of thread, but it was looking a little bit thin and I didn't really like it that much. So I decided to take those stitches out and do it again with 3 strands of thread. And I've done all of the outlines of the building. I outlined the roof and boardwalk. So I'm just gonna keep on stitching the outlines. I'll do like the river, the windows and the door. I'll just start stitching the like weatherboard and the boardwalk lines. Hey, it's Future Lindsay here. I just thought I would hop on very quickly with a voiceover because I changed my mind about something while I was stitching the window here and I didn't really explain it very well while I was doing it in the video. So I said I was not going to stitch the little lines into the window, but I ended up doing it on the left-hand one because I was like, oh, okay, I'll do 2 different techniques so we can see the difference. So yeah. And what I'll do there is I'll stitch diagonally the glass colour inside each individual space in the window. Alrighty, so that is all I'm doing for that window. Then I will just stitch the glass in there and I'll do the window panes over the top of it. I might even stitch the filling colour for both of those windows and see what each of them looks like and then decide which one I'm going to keep. Right, I'm doing another little close-up of this because I'm going to do a French knot as the doorknob and I may need to go over it again, that's all, because once I stitch the colour in the door it might disappear into the stitches a little bit, but I'll see how I go. Okay, so to do a French knot we just want to, on our little dot here, which is the line for our doorknob, I'm just going to bring the needle up kind of like at the top of that pen mark, and then I'm going to grab this bit of the thread here with my left hand and then I've got the needle in my right hand. I'm going to put the needle over that thread there and then I'm going to wrap the thread around the needle. I think I'll do it just once for this, but if you want to make a bigger French knot you can wrap it around more times. You can do 2, 3, 4, as many as you want. It'll just make a bigger knot, but I'm just wrapping it around one time and then finding a spot that is pretty much right next to the hole where we brought the needle up, but not in exactly the same hole because it'll all just go through and you won't make a stitch. You can maybe see there where we came up, then we've got our loop and then we've got the needle going down there. So I'm just going to push that through and keep holding the thread taut on this side and then without trying not to get any knots there, I'm going to grab the needle from the other side, still holding this bit tight, pulling that through and then pulling it all the way until we have a little knot there. So that makes a nice little circle instead of just doing little stitches, and it kind of adds a little different texture to your work. Alrighty, so I'm just going to stitch the windows using both different techniques. So I'll do this one first with each window pane stitched. So what I'm going to do is start in the corner, like the top corner of one of the squares, and then I'm going to make it diagonal. So I'm going to bring the thread down to the bottom corner and hold it there like that. And that'll just help me choose where I put the needle for that square. I'm just going to use that stitch as a guide to then do my next stitch next to it. I just did one stitch on the other side of that first stitch, and then I'm going to do a couple on the other side. You could do these stitches just straight as well, like straight up and down or sideways. I just usually like to do glass on a diagonal, so it kind of gives it the impression of being reflective. And this would be called satin stitch. I would think it's called satin stitch. It is exactly the same as satin stitch, but it's on a diagonal. So I don't know if that's something different, but I would just call it satin stitch. So you can really probably just go from corner to corner. I'm doing a close-up again for this one because then I can show you a little bit closer how to do the satin stitch on the diagonal. I'm bringing my needle up at the top corner of the window here, and I'm going to, I'll make the angle like this. So I'll go down to basically the second window pane line that I've got there. So I'm going to go to there. And then for the next stitch, I'll go back up here, right next to that last stitch, pull that all the way through, and then down again, right next to the other stitch. And then just keep doing that until you have filled it all in on this side, and then we'll just go down the other way as well. If it helps, you can also draw the diagonal lines on before you start stitching, if that helps you get the angle right. But you know what, if you don't like something, you can always just pull your threads back out and try again. All right, so I'm pretty well done in that top corner. So now I'm just gonna move over to here and bring the needle up next to that first stitch again, pull it through, and then make our same stitches, but on the other side. Now I've got my black thread back and on a needle. I'm just going to do stitches that are the full length of the window. So start here, about a third of the way across the window, and then I'm just going to hold that there so that I know whereabouts my stitch should be. I'm going to pull that through, a third of the way from the other side, and then I will stitch that there. Same thing for the lines going across, about a third of the way up. I think I actually did these stitches on the side. I did 3, so I can find the hole there. Okay, so I've stitched the 2 windows. This one is the one where I've stitched the window panes, and then I've stitched each bit of glass individually. This one is where I've stitched the entire area in one go, and then I've stitched the lines over the top. I think I like this side better. It kind of gives it a bit more, makes it a little bit more three-dimensional, because all of this is like on the same sort of level, whereas this one, it looks like those window panes are on like in front of the glass. And I'll just show you the back as well. So this is what they look like on the back. So this is the one where I've stitched each bit individually, and then this is the one where I've stitched the whole glass bit in one go. So the reason that I stitch the windows before I stitch the weatherboards is because I might end up with stitches going over the windows when I'm like switching from here to here. It wouldn't make a big difference, but I kind of like just having the windows done. And if there are those lines there, if I do jump across from here to here, then those stitches will be kind of loose on the back of there rather than being stitched underneath the window stitches, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's the windows. These, the little feet of the building are in the same color, gray, as the windows. So I'm gonna do those as well. And I'll do the white of the door, the window frames, and the roof. And then I'll come back. For the little feet of the boathouse, I'm using 3 strands of this grey thread, satin stitch. It's really only going to be like a couple of stitches. Right in the corner of the little space there, I'm just going to bring my needle up and pull it through, and then go down on the other side, up the top as well. So then you're doing the next one just next to it, or below it. I'm just going to jump across from there to there because it's not really that long. Again, I'll go in the top corner here, pull it through, in the other top corner. The next thing that I'm gonna do is fill in the window frames, frame of the door, and the roof. I'll use 3 strands of that as well. For the window frames, I'm going to do split stitch. I'm gonna start in the corner here, and our first stitch is gonna be exactly the same as our back stitch. So I'm coming up right in the corner there, pull it through, and then I'll do this in 3 stitches. So bring the needle down about 1/3 of the way down this side of the window frame, same as our back stitch. But then the difference with split stitch is instead of coming up 1 stitch length down here, and we're actually going to come up in between strands of thread on the last stitch and split it and pull it through. And then we'll make our second stitch another 1/3 of the way down, pull it through, and then do the same again, splitting that thread with our needle and then down to the bottom corner. And then to turn the corner, I'll just do 2 stitches along here. So we'll just go, because we've brought the needle down here, we can't bring it up in that same hole. So we'll go halfway along the bottom of the window frame, pull it through, and then in the middle of that stitch there and bring it down. So you can also do split stitch that way. Instead of bringing your needle up through the last stitch, you can come up at your next point, you're stitching, and then you can do it backwards. So you're actually splitting the thread when you're going down rather than when you're bringing it up. It honestly looks pretty much the same. I don't think anyone's really going to be able to tell. So you can do it however you like. I tend to do it that way when I'm going around a curved edge because you have a bit more control over, I guess, the curve of the line that you're stitching. If I'm just doing a straight line, then I'll definitely do it this way. Exactly the same as the window frame there. I'm going to do the door frame and the other window frame. I'm going to do satin stitch for the door. I'm going to start in the middle next to the doorknob just because we'll have to do these tiny stitches in between the door frame and the door knob, and that is going to be easier when there's no other stitches around. So I'm going to start on this side of the doorknob, and like I said before, I'm just starting in the middle. I'm just going to go straight, so that helps me define where I need to go there. And then I am going to do the tiny stitch on this side of the door. So I'm bringing my needle up again right next to the doorknob, pull it through, and just do that tiny stitch there. You can kind of push stitches out of the way to find where you need to be, but I'm just going to go there. So I'm just bringing my needle up here, which is like right next to the doorknob and right next to the last stitch there. I'll do another little stitch next to the doorknob on that side, just a tiny one. Now I'm going to start from this side, bring my needle up and then down all the way over the other side. And again, if you would like to draw some guidelines on there, you can really do that with any type of pen at this stage because you're going to be stitching all the way over it anyway. And that's it. You can just keep stitching side to side on there until you have filled in the whole space. If you don't want to do the satin stitch, you could also do split stitch. And what you would do there is the same as we did in the windows, except you would do it across the door this way, and then you would just do it in rows, exactly the same as the satin stitch, but you could do it in a couple of stitches. Let me just give you an example here. So do your stitch halfway, bring your needle up in the middle of that last stitch and go across, and then just keep doing that backwards and forwards across the door until you've filled it in. A similar result, but I kind of like doing satin stitch to make it look like it's all one sort of texture. Okay, so I'm about to stitch the roof, and again for this one there are 2 stitches that I would consider using. I would either choose a satin stitch or split stitch. The difference between the two, satin stitch would take a lot more time because you're not going to be stitching it from here to here. I would be doing satin stitches this way, from one side of the roof to the other, across like this. And so doing a lot of tiny stitches like that is going to take a really long time. Whereas split stitch, you're just going to do a line up here, maybe two, and then a line or two down this side. I'll show you split stitch and then I'll show you how I would do satin stitch, and you can decide which you would like to do. So I'm going to start by doing a stitch here. Doing this all the way up to the top of the roof, and then I'm just going to do exactly the same thing on the way down. I'm just going to show you as well how to satin stitch. Satin stitch going this way, so doing our stitches this way across the width of the roof. That's going to be a lot more labor intensive and finicky than just doing a bunch of stitches in a straight line like this. I'm just going to start at one of these lines here, and then I'll do the stitches between them all. So I'm just doing tiny little short stitches, and I'm just going backwards and forwards across the width of the roof. If I was going to do satin stitch down this side as well, I obviously want it all to meet up in the middle. So what I'm going to do is actually do a stitch at the top, a straight one that goes from the bottom part of the roof to the top, and then I'll just adjust my stitches in between the angle that matches these stitches down here. Okay, so I've finished doing the satin stitch in the other half of the roof, and I just wanted to show you the difference between them. So if you can sort of see the difference, this is split stitch on this side, and this is the satin stitch on this side. Hopefully that sort of shows you the difference. I prefer the satin stitch side. The other thing that I want to show you is the back, because the difference between the two stitches is quite significant in terms of how much thread you're using. Because with split stitch, you're doing one stitch and then you're only going back half a stitch to go through the last stitch and then moving forward. Whereas with split stitch, you're doing a whole stitch and then going back a whole stitch as well. So this is the satin stitch. So you're using the same amount of thread on the back as you are on the front. Whereas for split stitch, you're using significantly less than that one. Considering the time difference as well, like split stitch, you basically go up one row and then back down next to it. You're just doing 2 rows of split stitches. Whereas with satin stitch, you are doing a bunch of stitches. They're quite small and it's a lot more time consuming. So I would say if you're more focused on just finishing something and getting the finished product and stitching it quickly and practicing a fun new project, I would say do the split stitch. If you're more focused on the process of it and you're wanting to spend more time doing the embroidery, then I would say maybe challenge yourself and do the satin stitch. So ultimately, if you want to be a bit more economical, both with your time and with the amount of thread that you're using, split stitch is the way to go. If you are happy to use a bit more thread and spend a bit more time working on your piece, then do satin stitch. Okay, so now there's only a couple more things that I want to do to finish it off. So first, for the tiny little light, I think with the grey that I used for the windows, I'm just going to like satin stitch up and down, and then I'm going to do some little lines over it like I did with the windows. But yeah, I stitched all of the horizontal lines on the building. I don't know if I'm gonna do the ones on here because I haven't drawn them very well for a start, so I might even stitch rows of the brown and then I'll decide whether or not I need to add black lines to it as well. I don't want too many black horizontal lines on there, and because there's already so many with that, might leave it, but I'll see, because you can do it before or you can do it after. Either way, it's going to be all good. Okay, so I'm going to do the little light, and then I'm going to start stitching some of the weatherboards. I'm going to show you 2 ways again. So I'm going to do satin stitch and split stitch. You've already seen me do it on the roof, so it's exactly the same, but you're just going along those instead of along the roof. I said I was going to do the light first, but I've forgotten. So I'll start on one of the rows in the middle so that I don't have to go over that. All right, so again, exactly the same as doing the roof. You're bringing your needle up through the middle of your last stitch, pulling it all the way through, and then moving a stitch length along the line, and just keep doing that until you have gotten all the way to the end. Okay, so I've gotten all the way to the end, and then I'm just going to start again on another row. Now I'm going to do satin stitch in the space above where I just did the split stitch. So I'm starting again in the center of the space at the top, bringing my needle up and then going down on the other side of the space. So yeah, I'm just stitching up and down all the way along this row. Once I've stitched all the way across to this side, then I'll come back to the middle and I'll go all the way across to that side. To talk about it in the video while I was recording, but for the little light up the top, I just did a few vertical satin stitches. We've got our little light here, and I'm just going to stitch the little sort of cage thing over it. So I'm going to start pretty much at the end of this line here in the hole where that stitch ends, and bring it up and then go over to the other side. Just one stitch through the middle, and then I think I'll just do 2 little ones, like each a third of the way across the light. So I'm going to bring one up there and go to about here, and then another one here, and bring it down. And I can kind of like move the stitches around a little bit with my needle to make them nice and make sure they're sitting where I want them to be. Okay, so I have just finished stitching all of the weatherboards in blue. First time I showed you, I did a row of split stitch, and then from there I did a row of satin stitch, and then I was going to decide what I was going to do to fill in all of them. I actually decided to do a little bit of both. Some rows of threads are going horizontally and some stitches are going vertically, so the light kind of hits it a little bit differently. It kind of adds, without actually changing the color of your thread, it adds like a very subtle color variation. I think you can sort of tell here. So like this is split stitch, then the next 3 I believe are satin stitch. You can tell a bit more on the back there, so you can see that the satin stitch is the one where it's all filled in on the back as well, and the split stitch are the ones where there's a bit of blank space. So yeah, I think it looks really cool because when the light hits it in different ways, it looks quite different. The last thing that I need to do is fill in the wood of the boardwalk. First, with the darker brown, I'm going to stitch down these sides. I'm just going to do split stitch there. And then what I think I'm going to do is do split stitch as the boards, probably up to like maybe halfway down the boardwalk back towards the boathouse. I think I'll just do 1 row or maybe 2, and then at that point increase it by 1 row. If I do 1 here, then I'll start doing 2. If I do 2 here, then I'll start doing 3. I guess forcing a little bit of perspective there. So like these obviously are closer than those ones, so it looks a little bit bigger, I guess. With the boardwalk as well, I'm going to do alternating the light and the dark brown as I come down here. finished up stitching everything that's included in the pattern on my blue boathouse embroidery. And obviously I added some extra little things in there as well. I'm going to come back and talk about that in a second, but for now I am coming to tell you about how I finish up the back of my embroidery hoops so that they're ready to display. So what I'm going to do first is just cut the fabric around the edge, leaving about 5 centimeters around the circle of the hoop. And then I'm just going to grab some thread, usually something that I've just got laying around or something that is in my random thread jar that I've got here. Something that is about 3 or 4 strands of thread is usually pretty good for this. I'll just put that through a needle and add a quilter's knot like we did when we were stitching. And then starting at the top of the embroidery hoop, I'll push that needle through until the knot hits the end, and then I'll just start doing some little gathering stitches around that edge of the fabric so that I can kind of pull it all together at the back when I have finished. So I'll just stitch about 3 or 4 stitches at a time and pull the needle through until it's all done. At the end, I'll do a couple of overlapping stitches over the first few stitches that are there, and then all I'm going to do is tie a knot at the back again and cut off the excess thread, and then we are pretty much all ready to put our piece on display. Hey friends, it's Lindsay Stitches from the future coming to do the outro for this video. I finished my blue boathouse embroidery and hopefully you finished stitching yours as well. Mine ended up looking a little bit like this at the time, but now mine actually looks a little bit like this. Recently, I've been really enjoying adding some different sort of textures and elements to my embroideries to kind of make them a little bit different and unique. And watercolor painting is one of those things. So I actually ended up doing some watercolor in the river and in the sky, and then I added a few little birds in the sky as well, which I think make it look a little bit dynamic and fun. As well as the watercolor and the extra stitches, I painted my embroidery hoop brown so that it matches the boardwalk of the blue boathouse, and I think it looks really fun. If you want to add some extra fun elements to your embroidery to make it more unique and special to you, I made a separate YouTube video where I filmed the entire process of adding the watercolor paint, painting the hoop, and adding the extra stitches, so you can go and watch that as well. And yeah, thank you so much for watching this video and following along with the pattern. I hope you enjoyed the stitching process, and I hope this video was able to help you kind of do your own thing with your embroidery and not follow the rules, because that is not what I tend to do with my embroidery. I like to do something different. So yeah, I hope that was helpful for you and you enjoyed stitching the Perth blue boathouse. When you've finished doing your stitching, please send me photos. I would love to see your finished work. And yeah, hopefully we can stitch together again soon. Bye.